August 2013, Bucklebury Manor. Instead of a royal photographer, a 64-year-old man stands in the garden with a simple camera. Michael Middleton is photographing his first grandchild, Prince George. No studio, no protocol, just a father, his daughter, 2 dogs. A break with centuries of tradition, before the child is even a week old. A few weeks later, Prince Charles sits down with a Telegraph reporter. Grandparenthood, he says, is a different part of your life. He wants to introduce his grandchildren early to things that interest them. Exactly what his own grandmother once did with him. 2 grandfathers, 2 pictures in the same week. One in the garden with a camera, the other in an interview with a wish. 2 worlds begin to take shape around the same child. In 2015, Princess Charlotte is born. At her christening in Norfolk, 2-year-old George turns around as he leaves the church, not to look for his parents, but for his grandmother, Carole. Prince Louis follows in 2018. 3 children, 4 grandparents, 2 homes, Kensington Palace and Bucklebury. A few years later, during a museum visit, Charles shows his grandson his private fossil collection. William later tells the BBC his father was brilliant with the children, and that George simply loved the fossils. The origin of a dinosaur obsession that still follows George today. Carole becomes a constant presence. She drives herself through the palace gates in her own Land Rover. No security. Detail: everyone there knows her. She takes over bath time and bedtime whenever William and Kate are out for the evening. In December 2019, she babysits all 3 children while their parents attend the Diplomatic Corps reception at Buckingham Palace. Royal journalist Katie Nicholl later calls her a Mary Poppins-like figure, essential to how ordinary William and Kate are able to keep their family life. On the other side, that same Christmas, George and Charlotte walk publicly to church at Sandringham for the first time. Charles leans down to them, visibly checking on the nervous children. A few months later, in August, George and Charlotte sit in a boat at the King's Cup Regatta on the Isle of Wight. Beside them, Granny and Grandpa Middleton. On the Buckingham Palace balcony, Camilla suddenly puts out her arm as little George looks about to climb over the railing. A spontaneous, protective gesture few would expect from a woman often seen as more reserved. 2022, the Platinum Jubilee. A moment between Charles and 4-year-old Louis goes viral. The future king, leaning down to join in with his cheekiest grandchild. By now, the children have their own name for him, Grandpa Wales, taken from his former title, just as the late Queen once called her own grandfather, Grandpa England. May 2023. The coronation at Westminster Abbey. George carries a corner of Charles's coronation robe as a page of honor. Charlotte and Louis hold hands as they process into the Abbey. In the audience, Carole and Michael Middleton seated in the front row among ambassadors and archbishops, an ordinary family at the center of the monarchy's oldest ritual. January 2024. On her own podcast, Camilla reveals a detail from life behind palace walls. She and Charles read Harry Potter to their grandchildren together. 2 months later, news of Kate Middleton's cancer diagnosis hits the family with full force. On the first weekend Kate spends in the hospital, it isn't palace staff looking after George, Charlotte, and Louis. It's Carole and Michael at their home in Berkshire. Spring 2024. Charles's first public engagement since his cancer diagnosis. He wears a tie with a hidden T-Rex motif, a quiet nod to George's old dinosaur obsession. September 2024. Kensington Palace releases a private video. Kate has finished chemotherapy. What it shows is not fanfare, not protocol, but a family playing cards. William, the 3 children, Carole, Michael. Soon after, Louis writes a thank you card to Granny and Grandpa for playing games with him at the Christmas Carol concert. And in the middle of it all, almost in passing, a single sentence from William himself in an interview with Eugene Levy. The warmth, the sense of security he wants to build at home today, he says it definitely started with his mother. Diana is never named as a person at the grandchildren's kitchen table. She is the memory William carried with him into every bedtime, every Saturday dinner in front of the television that he himself experienced as a child, and that his own children experience today. April 2026, Easter service at Windsor. Charles pauses at the entrance to St. George's Chapel and blows a kiss to George, Charlotte, and Louis, waiting beside William. A few weeks earlier, at a birthday photo shoot, George on Charles's lap, Charlotte curled into Camilla, Louis with his mother. The photographer wanted it to feel less stiff than a classic portrait. By the end, everyone is laughing, children and adults alike, and that is the photo that travels around the world. 2 grandfathers, a Land Rover with no security detail, a palace with a coronation robe, one grandmother who runs baths and reads bedtime stories, another who reads Harry Potter and bakes biscuits. Neither world had to replace the other. George, Charlotte, and Louis did not grow up caught between 2 competing families. They grew up with both, and that is the family behind the happy childhood.